I've just started recording, and welcome. Today is Thursday, March 2nd, and today our host is going to be Caleb Miles. Caleb, are you here? I think I saw you. We didn't check your audio, though. Oh, we may have an issue with Caleb's audio. Well, we will test that over the time, but we can kick off with a demo from Michael Briggen. How do you pronounce that? With a D first? Michael Briggen, and he will be talking to us about Flux. Michael, go ahead.
Hi. Yes, Bridging it is, D first.
Okay.
That's right. Cool. So Flux is a tool that we built for Weave Cloud to help us run Weave Cloud first and foremost. We tried to build it in a way that it could be useful to other people, and we are also building it in as a thing you can use in Weave Cloud. Weave Cloud is our service that we sell, but it's also open source software. So what is it for? Well, it's a tool for keeping images that we build in CI in sync with manifests in Git, in sync with the running cluster in Kubernetes. And it is under active development. Now, in the following, there's going to be some web user interface components, but those are not necessary to use Flux. They're just the bits of cloud that I'm going to use to show stuff off a bit. Okay. So before I arrived here, I did a bit of setup stuff, some of which is stuff that you would probably all do for yourselves. That is, make a Kubernetes cluster. And I put an app on it. And the app is, so this is you can see there, that's the Kubernetes cluster. There's 3 hosts. So very exciting. And this is the app. So there's just a bunch of pods there, some of which are talking to other ones. And what it's actually doing is serving this sock shop, which is just a demo that container services and Weaveworks built together. So it's actually fully functional and quite good for using in demos because you can do all this sort of stuff, add it to a cart, one item in cart, that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's not really that important right now. What I wanted to show you was, first, some other things I did to set Flux up. First of all the manifests for that sock shop are in here somewhere in deploy Kubernetes. Manifests. So they're all just files in Git somewhere, and that's quite important because for Weave Cloud, and probably lots of you will have the practice of making changes to Git first and foremost, and then applying that to the Kubernetes cluster. So really, Flux is about kind of automating that process. Okay, so what next? There's a bit of setup to do with Flux. One thing was there's an agent that runs in the cluster. Oops, it's actually gone there. Never mind, I'm sure it's all still working. And we provide a way to set that up easily. It's just a little thing that connects into the service. You can also run a copy of the service yourself in case you're worried about using our one. And I did a bit of setup where I made a deploy key and gave that to Flux, and also put it into the Git repo so that it could actually commit changes on my behalf. Okay, so now I've done all that stuff. There are some things I can do. There is a command line tool. So I've given it a little bit of information in an environment variable which tells it which which cluster I'm actually talking to, and this is going via the service. So I can ask it to list all the things it can see. So you can see that kind of corresponds to a bunch of stuff that's running in the name of the sock shop. And it also tells me, for each of those things, tells me the containers and which images those containers are running. The main thing we want to do with Flux usually is to update images, usually off the end of a CI pipeline when we've built a new one. So lots of this automation is about doing that. So another thing we can do is dig into one of these services and see what images are actually available to run. So let's try Shop front end, which is the thing that actually does the user interface we saw for the sock shop. Okay, so that's telling us that there are a bunch of images that it could be running, and it's gone and fetched the data about the metadata about these from GitHub. And we're actually quite far behind on our version that we're running. It's just listing these in descending order of the most recent to the least. So, as I'm behind, I'm going to release. I'm just going to say release for this service. Shop front end. And that magic invocation just means please get the latest or the most recent of every image that's running. In this case, there's only one container, so there's only one image there. So it actually cloned the repo and looked for everything and then made some changes and then pushed them back, and it's given us a little report there telling us that it's updated from that old version that we were using to the much newer one. So if I repeat the thing here, yeah. So that's neat. And we can also go and look, I hope this is big enough for people to see. We can also go and look in the commits, and yes, there's one here from Flux that went and changed this file so that it had, instead of that old image tag, it's got the new one. So that's cool. I'm going to, oops, not there. I'm going to go here and I probably won't actually see any differences because I don't know what changed between these images. But let's pretend that we discovered that actually the latest image was terrible and that we have to go back to a prior image that is not so terrible. Actually, let me come back up to the top. So I can actually choose an image to update to, and having cleared my screen, I now have to remember what the name of the image is. Front end and 3.3. Now we'll find out whether there actually is one.
So Michael, you've got about 3 more minutes as well.
That's cool. I'm actually almost done.
Perfect.
This is the last bit. Well, it looked like that actually worked. Hooray. Okay. And let's check this. Yeah, cool. Wow. I know God has smiled on me. So that's really the essence of it. There's kind of 2 things that's automating there. One is making sure that when you update images, it goes smoothly, so it changes it in the right place in the file and figures out what to do there and then commits it back to GitHub. And the other one is making sure that that is also synced with what's running in your cluster. So there's a few tools that we saw that just tell you what's actually running in the cluster, which is handy to see. In our own, in Weave Cloud, the operations, we have a bunch of monitoring which tells us when things, config and so on, are out of sync with what's in Git. And this is really just extra belt and braces stuff to make sure that you move from one kind of known state to another known state. And the next things we're working on with Flux are, instead of just responding to changes in image versions, actually deploying new config when it gets committed, say if you merge a PR to choose some config, actually deploying that as well automatically so that there's sort of no excuse for having things in sync with Git. Yeah, so that is Weave Flux. Thanks all for watching. And I'll hand back to the host.
Awesome. Thank you. It was a great demo. Thank you also to Jason for volunteering to be the note taker. Important work here. Think we can get into our next topic here, which is releases. Do we have our release manager, Dan, on the line?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good evening or good morning, depending on where you are. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So CodeFreeze started on Monday, which means that after this point, the only thing that should be being merged are bugs basically that target 1.6. The code freeze is a hard deadline, so anything that was LGTM'd before the code freeze will be merged. Anything after, unfortunately, will have to make it to the next milestone, 1.7. And every PR that should be targeting 1.7 now that did not make code freeze. So we've been trying to do as fair of a job as possible of holding everyone to the same standards. And this was something that the community asked us to do, right? Which was to ensure that feature development did not occur after this hard deadline that we all set. And it was established actually as a criteria for if that didn't happen, the release may have to get moved back because the way that we were doing the release is dependent on features not changing after a certain point. I appreciate the large number of exceptions that were filed. This is the largest number of exceptions we have gotten before for a Kubernetes release. So we really appreciate people getting those in. And those will be reviewed tomorrow at the milestone burn down meeting. Just for everyone who has put an exception, they should be aware that they are only granted historically in very, very, very rare circumstances. I believe only for 1.5, only a single exception was granted. So just be aware that probably your exception will be denied, and decision will be made on complexity and but generally it probably will be denied. Just heads up. Cool. And any issues with this process should definitely be raised in retrospective. We're constantly revising the way we do things. I'm just trying to run code freeze as it's been described to me, but totally in future releases, totally open to having different processes. Cool. I think we have a few things in chat before we go on. So the question was, what if an LGTM was removed after a rebase? So just working off of what other release managers have said historically, if it's for something like a rebase that the LGTM was removed, then that's totally fine. Or if it's for a very, very, very clear, specific feature fix, or sorry, like bug fix that's scoped in its complexity, that's fine. If it's something where it's unscoped or it's unclear exactly what's wrong, then the LGTM doesn't stand anymore because the code was not ready by code freeze. So unfortunately, that will not make it into 1.6. Is there any other, before we move past code freeze, does anyone have any things they want to say?
So quick question, how are we separating out sort of features that didn't make it, this is Joe, features that didn't make it versus bugs? Like, because right now we have an issue where the Docker version number changed. It was, a little bit of a surprise, and the pre-flight checks for kubeadmin don't catch it. So is that something we should file an exception for, or consider it a bug? I mean, how are we viewing that?
I think something like that could be considered a bug, but I think if there is some doubt, it's always better just to file an exception request. But we're nearing the end of that period, so hopefully those get raised as soon as possible. We said that we would not accept them past 11 last night, but Pacific time. But if there's anything, please try to get them in as soon as possible. Or sorry, 11 tonight.
Okay, I'll send mail right now on that one.
Okay, yeah. So if there's anything, please raise them now as part of the exception process. And it's better just safe than sorry to put into the exception process. Some of these things that could totally be bugs, and if they're bugs, then they'll go in as bugs. We're not trying to nitpick here, but it's just we're trying to ensure that if it's actually feature work, it goes in as a feature and should be in 1.7. Any other questions around?
Let me add a few cents from me. So let's decide that everything that is placed in the features repo is defined as a feature. Otherwise, it's a bug. That's the answer for Jude's question.
Yeah, I think it's a little less clear cut because there's several things that I would consider features that aren't in the features repo, especially around changes. I think that we're going to have to make a case-by-case judgment on certain things, but yeah, that's a really good guideline in general. If it's in the features repo, it's definitely a feature. That's for sure. There's a few things that, for example, if you're adding tests, it's sort of depending on how many tests you're adding, that can go either way. Yeah.
And there was a note in the chat from Aaron that there is at least a proposal to not remove LGTM for trusted authors. So the rebase problem should be less of a problem, hopefully moving forward.
Right. Yeah, and it's not our intention to take away an LGTM for a rebase. And if we are doing that, please let us know. That wasn't intentional. We were just trying to manage. Yesterday, and if we removed you from the milestone yesterday, and you should be in it, it was unintentional. There was just 96 open PRs in the milestone that we had to sort of get through. So please reopen it. It wasn't anything personal, but yeah. Cool. So unless there's anything else with code freeze, move on.
So I have a quick question I'm hoping maybe Brian Grant can speak to real quickly, although perhaps we should take this offline and discuss more in depth at the next meeting. It's specifically around the use of priority labels versus queue labels. So at the moment, there's a document that lays out all the labels that should be applied to issues, and they're things like priority, critical, urgent, priority, important, soon, things of that nature. But if you go to the submit queues page and read the algorithm that it uses to sort things, it still refers to things like priority P0 and priority P1. And it seems like the GitHub, the Munge GitHub program hasn't been updated to use the priority labels. So when I asked about that, Brian's response was, well, really, we should be using the queue labels, which I'm having difficulty finding a document for short of the PR that Brian pointed me to in Contrib. But I'm just sort of unclear, what are the labels we're using going forward? What's the policy, right? Because we had a bit of a discussion during the last burn down meeting of when is it appropriate to bump priority to get your thing through the queue? Does this go back to the idea of fix a flake, get a bump, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I can speak to that. There was a discussion back in December about moving away from the priority labels. Unfortunately, the work was dropped. It did not get done by anyone. So the automatic flake filer and priority updater still uses the old priority labels, and so does the submit queue. I still think we should finish both of those updates and move to the new model. In particular, flakes, I think the priority labels are totally useless. We just need monitoring for flake frequency, and that's a separate data source. Most of the flake issues don't get attention anyway, so that's a whole separate discussion. As far as gaming the priority queue, the reason we discussed moving to the new labels is to make it really clear what the scenarios were where it was appropriate to actually use the labels, and then give us the freedom in the submit queue to decide what the proper ordering should be. I don't believe people should be, in general, bumping the priority of their issues to get them in sooner than other people. There are problems that need to be fixed, like if the submit queue is broken, in which case it should bypass the normal checks, or whether something is getting rebased too frequently and will never get in if it doesn't get bumped. But in general, especially with batching, it should be much less necessary, and we shouldn't be trying to manually schedule the submit queue. We should be fixing the submit queue stability and velocity problems. So I think right now it's, I don't have anyone who has volunteered to go implement the changes, and doing it in the middle of the release probably, as you suggested, probably is not the best idea. But for 1.7, I think we should just cut over and make the change and actually fix the root cause of the problems and stop manually scheduling the queue.
I agree with all of that completely. I think my question here is just, can we all agree to use the same set of labels in the same way? And maybe that's the discussion we need to take to the burn down meeting to decide what's most effective for Dan to help triage the queue. But I just wanted to raise it here because it's been unclear to me. I'm not sure how many other people have been looking at it.
Yeah, unfortunately it is in an intermediate state. So sorry about that, but this is another just call out. Please come help with contributor experience so this kind of stuff gets closure.
And please also, off of that, review that governance umbrella issue that you filed, Brian.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know if we want to get into that particular thing now. If there's time at the end, maybe we can talk about the status of that and some other things in the project.
Cool. Can move down to features in a second. Just one last note on the release here in the subsection on flakes. We've been collecting.
Sorry, I have a few more things I want to go through.
Oh,
before we
okay.
get to flakes.
Sure.
Yeah. So the next one is E2E suite ownership. So in general, I think we should figure out a way to have owners for each suite who's responsible for keeping them up. But very specifically for the GKE flakes, I think we need someone from Google to take up ownership for them. Several of them are failing, and it's not the kind of thing that normal contributors are able to effectively address. So I would suggest they either get owned by someone at Google or they get removed from blocking the release. So is there someone at Google who is willing to take up ownership for that?
I'm just going to dovetail on this and say, like, the analogy I would use is if the KOps tests were flaking and broken, I would know the person to go poke. It'd probably be Justin Santa Barbara or maybe SIG AWS, right? It's unclear to me who owns GKE.
Yeah, there's some thread about this that I will find and poke. So I'll take that action item to find someone.
Great. And GKE is just a special case of a general case of how do you assign proper ownership for, cloud provider, like vendor level tests. I know as we see more Azure issues being filed, it's a similar kind of problem. There's no necessarily central point of contact to ping there besides, Brandon Burns, who's not here today.
Yeah, he wasn't able to join us today, but he will be back next week.
Do you have anything else, Dan? Or do you want to move into risks?
We can move into risks. Yeah, so just identifying a person there will be important. Moving into risks, biggest risk that I see right now for the release is that automated SKU testing are in the process of still being set up, so we don't have a clean signal there yet. There is frequent flaking of certain non-upgrade suites that also threaten the release. And again, this hasn't really happened yet, but if there are features merged after code freeze, then that also jeopardizes the release. So something to be aware of. And from there, I think we can move on to flakes.
Cool. We've just been trying. So a PR went in for the CI bot that labels flakes to now start adding a label for SIGs based on what's in testowners.csv. We've also gone back and added the same labeling based on that map to the existing backlog of flakes. So we plan on publishing week over week reports on flakes. So you should ideally, and we'll move this to GitHub issues probably fairly soon here. But if you are part of a SIG, you should ideally look at that, help close out old flakes, because it makes it more difficult to try and get a good signal on the health of the release with all these old flakes. Also, it contributes to our general problem of having far too many issues to have anyone reason about sensibly. GitHub's not even trying anymore with our 5,000 plus. So I think that's probably it that I have for flakes. If you have any issues or want to help out specifically with flakes, please reach out and contribute your experience. There's a Google group there, or send a mail to the SIG PM group, and we can get you routed.
I just have one quick point. We're not actually seeing a lot of flakes on the 1.6 jobs yet. I think the frequency of execution isn't high enough to trigger them because it's random in some cases. But we are seeing flakes on the serial job. And in one case, we actually have a hard failure. And I guess we have to figure out a way to fix this. But the problem is that some tests only run in the serial job. So if all the merge jobs pass, your PR merges, you could have actually broken something in the serial job, and we don't actually know that until we pay attention to that. So I don't think there's a good answer. I'm just like, if people, maybe if you're watching the jobs for flakes, the serial jobs are maybe a little bit more important around release because they could actually indicate regression, not just flakes. That makes sense? I'm also looking for help for a couple of flakes that are they're not like super consistent. They are flakes, but they exist in master and 1.6. One of them I'd be interested in hearing whether people think it should be disabled. It actually fails all the time. That's the restart API server one. It never passes in the serial job. So the other one is the rescheduler one fails often enough that it probably deserves some attention. I'm assuming that's a scheduling thing. If someone from SIG scheduling maybe could look into that. And that's all.
Cool.
Yeah, and then, sorry, one last thing about just flakes being linked to SIGs. If you do see that a flake has been assigned to a SIG and you don't agree with the assignment, instead of just leaving it be there, if you could figure out what SIG it would make the most sense for and tag it as that, that'd be great.
Yeah, we do have the general problem of the occasional unassigned your SIG or yourself. I think there's also, please look at the doc, that link there, working to develop metrics around flakes, where Brendan Burns has proposed an SLA for flakes, because the voluntary triage has not seemed to be effective. So the proposal links in whether the submit queue will be running given how many flakes are currently detected by the system. So please comment on that PR against community. I think we can move into features. Ihor, we still have you?
Yes, I am. So talking about the features, we had the PM group meeting on Tuesday where we have discussed the actual state of the features for 1.6 release. We've been running like something like decrement of the backlog that we have, and we have defined 33 features that will go with 1.6 release. We have 33 features that are labeled as alpha, beta, or stable, and I'm also going to create a separate report which features will target alpha, like the brand new features for this release, and what of the features have been already developed for Kubernetes, and they have been past some stabilization period, like upgraded from beta to beta or stable status. So we are requesting feature owners to update their features. If you know that you have any feature that has been targeting 1.6 and you have it in the features repo, but you haven't updated it and you are not seeing this feature in the release, so you haven't contributed any code, please close it. We also I'd like to have a call for the feature owners to start working on the release notes, like human readable release notes that we will add to the final release. And also we'd like to highlight the features that are going to be highlighted by like some marketing activities that are going to be added to the blog post and so on. So if you're a feature owner and you have your feature, please prepare the features notes, the release notes, and also please start working on the documentation if you haven't yet. Another item that I'd like to highlight that on Tuesday we had the PM meeting, and one of the gaps that we have faced that the role of the SIG PM representative hasn't been like absolutely clearly defined for everyone. So we would like to have all the SIGs represented at the PM meetings, or if you are not able to represent your SIG at the PM meetings, please reach out directly and just to be in touch regarding the features or some other stuff that is related to your SIG.
Is there a regular schedule for the SIG PM meetings? Because every time they come up, I find I already have a conflict by the time they get scheduled.
Yeah, we have scheduled the regular meetings on Tuesday. The actual time for your time is on in the community report. So PM group, the community report. So there are biweekly meetings that are held on Tuesday. As far as I remember, it's 8 a.m. for PST time. And yeah.
I was going to say,
but
I can see some echo.
yeah, hey, we're having echo problems. I think that fixed it. So I just wanted to comment. I've been showing up to that meeting on behalf of SIG Scale, at least occasionally. I think that there is a pretty big mismatch between the model that you're proposing and the expectations of the SIG leads. And this is definitely a governance issue that requires a lot more discussion. I think my suggestion would be, thanks, Joe. My suggestion would be that if a feature owner needs to get through the PM approval process, and parenthetically, it isn't clear that even that has to happen, but let's say that it were that really the feature owner specifically needs to show up and make their case, is just really unrealistic at this point. It's unrealistic at this point to expect that the SIG leads are in any position to defend or represent the sort of vast quantities of features that are trying to flow through the system here. Yeah, I'll hand it.
I want to back that up. I think like we should really rotate on features and who's actually leading to get a feature out, and we should be talking and presenting on that instead of SIGs. I think SIGs are a great place for folks to meet together and organize meetings, but I would love to see us, instead of having SIGs present at this meeting, I'd love to rotate that around features, because like there are features going in that like I had no idea that they were happening. They were never mentioned in this meeting. They're impacting the API. I think it's a great opportunity to share the good work that people are doing so that everybody knows the stuff that's happening in the release as it happens. And I don't want to call out anything specifically, but like, you know, and a lot of the SIGs actually never present to this group, never actually talk and essentially work, you know, I wouldn't say hidden, but obfuscated from the rest of the community.
So, Joe, I'm working fairly diligently to work our way through all of the SIGs, making sure that they are reporting into this group. And we have features aligned with SIGs, so I think that having both features and SIGs reporting makes sense. But that we need to be more diligent about making sure that the features are reported on from the SIGs. Sorry, the echo is driving me nuts. I've muted you again. It's out of Heptio. That's why we've been battling, yeah. So that we need to be more diligent about making sure features get demoed or features get reported on, as opposed to just what is the SIG doing and the person who's thinking about it at the time answers. So I think there's a balance there, because I don't want us to pivot around features in the same way that you just described, like moving SIGs away. We actually have features assigned to SIGs, so we just need to make sure that the features are reporting up properly.
Yeah. I wanted to add in there. I think Bob Weiss's comment was actually more about the PM group meeting, I think, if I read that correctly. And I think, Joe, if I understood your comment, that was about this community meeting and that the SIGs report out at this community meeting. But it sort of conflates the two things, because it sounds like the problem is there are actually features that are happening in the release that the SIG leads themselves aren't aware of, which is very surprising, because generally the SIG is meeting, and whatever features members of that SIG are working on, my assumption is, and I think all our assumption is, that those are getting discussed in those SIG meetings. So there shouldn't be anything totally new for the SIG leads. There might be something new that maybe isn't getting reported in this community meeting, but there shouldn't be anything new for the SIG leads, and therefore also not for the PM group.
I don't think that what Joe and I were saying was conflicted at all. I think that you definitely have a strong expectation for the roles of the SIG leads with regards to the message and their role in the PM meeting. And I don't think that that's understood, shared, or actually realistic. Just being aware of what topics have been discussed in a SIG meeting does not prepare a SIG lead to be a mini product manager and come in with like full status, update, defense, context. You know, one of the things that we've seen here recently, which kind of dovetails into this, is that we're not using automated systems. We're not requiring that people fill out forms. Like, way too much of the information here is held in individual human heads, as opposed to being in some searchable, documentable, formalized way. And so it puts this huge load on the individuals. I mean, we saw this at the last SIG PM meeting where no one knew the status, and you couldn't actually go and read the status because people hadn't been keeping up with their documentation. So all of these problems kind of tie together, putting a bunch of load on the SIG PMs, on the SIG leads to try to cover that gap, I think is really...
I think you're right. Yeah, so our expectation on the SIG leads is not quite as high as I think you're saying, and maybe we haven't communicated that properly. So we can communicate that better. No, I don't think that the SIG to have, sorry, someone was saying something? Again, I don't think we're expecting the SIG leads to know every feature in detail. No, this is why we've been trying to have a PM rep work with the SIG leads for every SIG. And part of the gap is that we haven't got a PM rep for every SIG. I think there's one or two SIGs where we need to fill that. And I think we'll be able to do that in the next 2 weeks. And that's where we had a gap also in the PM group meeting. So that's one. I agree with you about processes, and particularly on the template. The template has been overly complicated. So we're trying to simplify that as well. But on governance, I think I'm happy to have a discussion. I think we should have a discussion. Joe, are you trying to say something?
Yeah, we're super echoey, and I apologize to everybody for that. So I'm going to try and be explicit when I talk here and not cause problems for folks. The point that I was trying to make here is that, again, there's a ton of features that are going in that essentially get no exposure. Even if they get exposure in the PM group, they aren't known by the wider community. And again, I don't want to call out anybody specifically, but I would love to see, as part of our feature process, a requirement that as a feature is proposed, it's at least mentioned, right? As the design is locked down, we essentially maybe have a design meeting that we advertise and everybody can come and actually see and understand what's going on. As the feature is going to alpha, we actually talk about it and we get a demo in the meeting, right? Same thing as it moves to beta and GA. We need to actually sort of, you know, have the day-to-day stuff happening in the SIGs, but like, we can't say that the SIG is just sort of the bubble that hides all this stuff. We really need to bring this stuff into the wider community.
So I agree with that in the abstract. However, there's something on the order of 30 features in this release. If we were to dedicate a 10-minute demo slot for every feature for this meeting, like, we wouldn't get through all the features in time for the release, right? So SIG PM is actually a SIG itself. It seems like they could probably be reporting out at convenient checkpoints. So I know that when they went through there was like a 2-part series of meetings. That was the 1.6 feature freeze meeting, I think, where, you know, we decided like what was in and out. I personally didn't attend those, but I know there were video recordings that were posted to some mailing list someplace. I think maybe the disconnect is that wasn't broadcast to this community. seems like it would have been really awesome to have just like a quick 5-minute, 10-minute summary from some representative from SIG PM to say, hey, here's what we think 1.6 looks like. All
Yeah.
right.
I really like some of these comments, especially the idea that you just sparked in my mind is that we could use the PM meetings to have demos for, especially the features that may be falling through. I mean, maybe only some of them graduate to this meeting because we think that they're cross-SIG, and so those can graduate here. For the rest, we can do a summary for this community meeting. But I do want to point out that puts a burden on feature owners. They'll have to come to the PM group meeting and present their features to make sure, yeah, so.
Can we rename it SIG features instead of SIG PM?
Yes.
SIG features.
I guess I'm a little confused because I thought we were trying to make a push to have more local autonomy to the SIG, and it seems like you're now pushing against that. Can we comment on that some?
There seems to be a lot of different kind of discussions here, and would just suggest, just in the interest of time, to talk about these and some of the governance work that is currently ongoing or on the contributor experience and SIG PM mailing lists, if people are okay with that. I'll just get through the rest of the agenda for today.
Well, we were going to have a meeting to talk about governance, but it never happened.
Yeah, so I just want to raise this, like, you know, a forum like this is a lousy place to design governance. You know, we really need to get a smaller, more focused group that's willing to put a lot of time and effort into structured governance. I think feature planning is just one small element of that. There's going to be a whole bunch more. We were going to have this meeting. Brendan volunteered to schedule it. He has not volunteered. I've not seen anything forthcoming. I am happy to take that on if there are no exceptions from the community to actually start getting much more focused on governance. Does anyone have issue with me actually scheduling the meeting?
So Brendan isn't here today. Could you mute Heptio? Sorry about that. Brendan isn't here. He has been collecting results. He sent out 2 groups of surveys, and we can hopefully expect we can ask for an update on scheduling from him on the next community meeting. I just would feel bad about, reassigning it mid-flight, especially since he's not here to talk about how that's going.
Craig, there was a plan.
With things like this.
I mean, it's been weeks.
This is urgent to the community. We're 1 month in. Really
Hang on. It has been weeks, but there was an intentional discussion to wait until after the Kubernetes survey came back in to move forward with the governance conversation. So there was an explicit plan to wait for that to happen. That will happen. That closes on Friday. And we are going to discuss the responses from that next week on this meeting. And then I would also, in that time, expect that we can pull together a governance, schedule a governance meeting.
Yeah. The other thing that happened was there were just a few back-to-back conferences and other events in a row and a federal holiday in the US. So I think, in fact, even the day and time was already sorted out by a previous availability survey. And we're just waiting for the opportune moment to actually start meeting. I actually put together an issue that collected a list of the known things that have been brought up that haven't been resolved by other discussions.
Hopeful is I'm feeling a great sense of urgency to actually start digging in and discussing, and I think a lot of this needs to be done in a forum rather than offline. At some point, I think we're going to need to do like a day or two, just lock in the core stakeholders and sit down until we actually have a governance structure in place. And I think the sooner we start on that, the better. So it sounds great. Thanks, folks. I just want to make sure we're making progress. I'm happy to participate. I think we all care a lot about this.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll just call out is we added a number of these finer grain GitHub teams and mirrors to Google Groups. I just asked the SIGs try to make use of those, and the intent is to create more targeted channels that people can use to watch what's going on across multiple SIGs. With just one fire hose per SIG, it was basically impossible to do that. So, with the hope is with feature request proposals and design documents being more narrowly targeted, that it will be possible to watch things that you might care about, right? Because there are more and more issues that touch multiple SIGs since we have more focused SIGs.
Great, and thank you all for the discussion. So there is one note for the 1.5x.
I'm sorry, Caleb.
Yep.
Just one note from me again, like following our current discussion again 1.6 and the previous 6 p.m. meeting. So I'd like to second this idea to have like the separate discussion regarding the governance and procedural, to solving these procedural gaps and issues. The second question that I'd like to highlight, regarding the features template. So as you know, we currently using the features template that requires constantly updating the checkboxes and so on. So this is the final release where we have decided to use this features template. We would like to simplify it, and I'm currently working on simplifying the features template. So the goal for the new features template is to, for the feature owner, just to see it once, just to edit it once, and don't edit it like anymore else, and to track all the progress of the feature in the features issue. I have created the umbrella issue. I have placed the link to the notes, and I would like to collect the feedback from the community, how the new features template should look like, and how can we avoid the previous mistakes and problems that we have with the existing one. That's all from me.
Okay. Thank you, Ihor. There is one note for the 1.5 release. There'll be a 1.5.4 cut hopefully tomorrow, March 3rd. Did you want to say anything about that, Marcin, or is that just was that enough?
I think Marcin's not able to join us, so he said
Okay.
go ahead and just mention that. I believe Jess is going to join us, though. Maybe.
Hey.
Hey.
So there aren't that many cherry picks right now, so we'll probably not do a release for 2 weeks from Friday unless like an emergency comes up, but just continue to ping me. And if there is an emergency, obviously ping me as well.
Okay, great. And I apologize to SIG Scalability and SIG APA Machinery, but let's see what we can do for an update. Bob, do we have you?
You have me.
And an echo.
Good. How's that?
Better, I think.
Okay, great. I did want to share my screen here. If I can, let me try.
Success.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Let me click on the present button. All right, still looking good? Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right, so just a quick logistics recap. I won't spend much time on this. This is really unchanged, but in case you need it. By the way, this slide deck is in the 6 scale notes. So there's a nice circular dependency here if you care to try to chase it. But maybe we can, I can post this presentation in the main notes as well. So just to give you some flavor for how things generally have been proceeding, we generally have conversations in sort of 3 topic areas. One is stuff that's right under our noses, then more strategic, longer running stuff on improvements generally, and then there's been quite a lot of talk, and I think we all expect that there's going to be a continued conversation as we go through both of these sets of things around benchmarks, config sharing, and results sharing. So on the immediate work front, so we have no formal performance target upgrade from 1.5 to 1.6. Part of that is the 1.6 stability targets. However, there is some important stuff going on in the 1.6 release. The big one is etcd3. There's been a lot of work actually over multiple releases to get that in. It's in good shape for the new clusters. It is the default from 1.6. 1.5 to 1.6 upgrades are in good shape. At the SIG meeting this morning, we had a pretty long conversation about the Google's. I think Google is the main participant that is operates with data migration from 1.6 back to 1.5. And there's some. I guess there was some comment this morning that testing was maybe caught up in some of the flakes. But just to point out that that's probably a Google only concern. A 1.5 to 1.6 upgrade for most is going to involve an outage window, so you could do a snapshot and a rollback that way. So, so let me get back to the formal performance target upgrade. Ongoing performance is generally up and to the right. We continue to work on that. 5,000 node clusters are possible to run. They're possible to run in sandboxes, but we did not update the performance target in a formal way. Maybe we can do that in 1.7. Okay, so in terms of the general consensus on our longer term goals, and this relates back to the 5,000 node and beyond kind of roadmaps, the current SLOs really need to be expanded. We have decided that there's so many possibilities here that our best path forward is to pick one and really concentrate on that, and also make sure that we pick one that is useful in performance regressions. So that's a conversation that's been ongoing. We have not nailed down for sure what's the one new SLO we think we should focus on. But one topic that comes up over and over again is the need to move away from I wouldn't say move away from, to add, in addition to the synthetic performance benchmarks and tests that we use today, a more comprehensive, more real world-like suite. The Red Hat folks have done a lot of work on this area, so a shout out to them. I have some links here in the proposal. There's a doc and also a YouTube video. This is an area of ongoing work. Related to this is that depending on what controller mix you use, performance can be very variable. Some of the controllers are older, more mature, have been more tuned. Some of the controllers less so. So that gets back to being careful about really large configurations, making sure you know what you're doing. Part of that, related to that, is I think we've recognized that there's a need for some updated configuration performance guides, especially for new entrants to the community. Also, the benchmarking is still needed for very large clusters, especially on some of the non-Google infrastructure systems like AWS. And then we do need to step up our game on formalizing our performance statements for future releases. I think we'll definitely take a crack at this for 1.7. If you go into the feature repo, the statement that's there is not wrong, but it's just a bit out of date and it needs an update. And then on to sort of our third track of conversations around how do we, in all these different environments with different configurations, how do we more clearly and in an automatic and kind of analyzable way, how do we share data? So there are a couple of efforts going on in this area. The folks at Google have been working on a performance comparison tool to run more formal comparisons from run to run. And the Samsung folks we've been working on, and we've got a lot of support around the community because it's one of those kind of cuts across a bunch of the projects, a long-term effort to try to come up with a better way to automatically capture configs so that you have not just the performance data from a run, but you have the configuration data from the run. And there's lots and lots of tuning settings in the systems that we have found influence the results of that. So I think before I just make it, we already had a bit of a discussion about this, which is, the roles of SIGs and SIGs leadership is being debated. There's possibly some big changes in the works. Brian's been proposing some things in a governance doc. So just to sort of pile on to the previous conversation, this is definitely a big deal. And I think that one of the special topics here is there are these overlay SIGs that kind of cross other SIG boundaries, and we're going to have to figure out the role for those going forward. So I think this is a pretty complex topic on a distributed system. So I've done my best to try to give a consensus view, but I'd certainly suggest anyone that wants to jump in from the SIG scaling meetings to jump in and provide any further context they think is useful. Or I can answer questions.
We also have one more SIG update that we'd love to squeeze in if we can.
Great.
So maybe questions offline and then reporting back if need be.
Great. Moving on.
Thank you, Bob. Do we still have you, David?
Yes, I'm here. So I'm going to give a brief update of what API Machinery has done in 1.6, and then plans that we have for 1.7, plans but not promises. So in 1.6, we are probably best known for the great code migration. There was a lot of refactoring, a lot of code moved around. It ended up well, though, and I'll tell you why. We have a generic API server library that can now be used as a stable base for building Heapster and for building the service catalog. Those are two concrete projects that people care about, and we're trying to move forward for being able to handle things like custom metrics from Heapster for driving HPA and for service catalog. It's a missing feature, and it's going to be great to have once we have it. The big pain that we had was around Client Go. And so we tried to address the pain in Client Go. We turned off automatic syncing until we are able to be sure that we don't auto-break the client again. There is a status doc that was published. The README has been updated to show how you can rely on Client Go, and there are people actively working on how to make it easier to use and to get the auto-syncing working. In addition, we started work on something called Acute Aggregator. It's a project that is still in its early stages, but it's needed to be able to unify additional API servers, things like service catalog, so that we don't have to include it into the core API server, but that it can be exposed as a first-class entity to clients, even if it is not a first class when compared to the core Cube API server. The implementation of 1.6 is not ready for prime time, but we will be working on it in 1.7. The other thing that we did in 1.6 was we have changed the garbage collection implementation. There's been a long-running issue for synchronous garbage collection since there were issues with the original implementation around orphaning. We have merged it already. We haven't seen any additional flakes from the new GC, and more resources are now turning on the garbage collection links, which should really help with user expectations around deletion. I delete this and it deletes the things that it created for me. So that's what we did in 1.6. Let me read to see if, okay, no questions on that. And in my last minute, I'll talk briefly about 1.7. In 1.7, we plan to start addressing third-party resources. Third-party resources have numerous issues with them. Some of them have been collected into one larger feature issue, number 95. We have started threads and documents for how we might address some of these problems, where we'd like to go, and how we want to have it integrated. But I think the most important piece is that we aren't going to break existing TPR usages, and if we do end up having to make significant changes, we will provide a migration path so that early adopters won't get screwed. The other thing we plan to do in 1.7 is to try to integrate the Acute Aggregator into the Cube API server so that it becomes easier to actually include something like service catalog or an additional API server of your choice. And that's going to be really important moving forward so that there's less friction to try to get these pieces up and off the ground. So that's a high level of 1.6 and 1.7, and hopefully that's just under time.
That was fantastic. Thank you, David. Unfortunately, we will not have time to get to the questions. We'll move those to the next meeting. There are a couple of important notices. Please take a look at those. First and foremost, please fill out the Kubernetes developer happiness survey by tomorrow. And there are announcements for Kubernetes Day at various upcoming conferences and summits that you may be interested in going to. With that, I believe we are done. You can have your 1 minute back. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Caleb, for hosting.
Yep. See you all next week.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.